You know, for the first time in what feels like a lifetime, the idea of a nuclear arms race is back. It's in the news, it's on people's minds, and it's forcing us to ask a question a lot of us thought was history. Are we stumbling into a new, maybe even more dangerous arms race? All right, let's really get into this.
And boom, it all really kicked off with this one statement. A single sentence that could potentially flip decades of American nuclear policy on its head. And believe me, it sent some serious shockwaves around the entire planet.
Now, here's why that's such a massive deal. For more than 30 years, the world's major nuclear powers have had this kind of gentleman's agreement, a freeze on explosive nuclear tests. This pause, it's been this incredibly important, even if a little shaky, foundation for global stability. It's what's kept everyone from just racing to build the next biggest, baddest weapon.
And the response? It was fast. Almost immediate. Within just a few days, the Kremlin made it clear it was not going to be left on the sidelines. They officially started looking into restarting their own testing program. And just like that, this dangerous tit-for-tat escalation, it wasn't just some theory anymore. The first domino had fallen.
So to really wrap our heads around how serious this moment is, we kind of have to look back. The fears we're feeling today, they're not new. They're a direct echo from the Cold War, a time that was literally defined by the terrifying idea of mutually assured destruction.
Just look at how close we came, and not just once. You've got 49, when the U.S. monopoly on the bomb ended, then the Cuban Missile Crisis in 62, where the world literally held its breath, and even a simple NATO wargame in 83 was mistaken for the real thing, bringing us right back to the edge. This history? It's the backdrop for everything that's unfolding right now.
And the thing that kept that whole tense situation from boiling over was this concept, the Nuclear Triad. Think of it like a three-legged stool of doom. The ability to strike back from land, from sea, or from the air meant that nobody could ever launch a first strike and hope to get away with it. It wasn't about winning a war. It was about making sure that starting one was absolute suicide. That was deterrence.
Okay, so let's flash forward to today. The first big shockwaves from this new tension are crashing right into Europe. And it's forcing this really tough conversation about its own security, especially after decades of basically sheltering under the U.S. nuclear umbrella.
And, this isn't some brand new panic. Check out this quote from Francis Emmanuel Macron. He said this years before things got to this point. It just goes to show you that these doubts about relying on the old NATO structure, well, they've been simmering for a very long time. And all that doubt has led to this big push for something called European Strategic Autonomy. The idea behind it is actually pretty simple. Europe needs to be able to stand on its own 2 feet, to protect its own interests, without always having to wait for the green light from Washington. But, and this is a really important distinction, we have to be clear about the terms. For most European leaders, the goal is de-risking. Think of it as building a stronger, more independent European pillar inside the house of NATO. It's not decoupling, which would be like packing up and moving out of the house entirely, a much riskier move.
But yeah, saying it is one thing. Doing it is another. The challenges are huge. You've got different countries seeing threats completely differently. There are massive holes in their military capabilities. Their defense industries are all scattered. It is a monumental task, to say the least.
All right, so let's zoom out a bit, because what's happening now isn't just the old US versus Russia game. No, the playing field has gotten way more crowded, and the rules, well, they're getting a lot fuzzier.
And this chart right here really shows you the new world we're in. You've still got the big established arsenals of the US and Russia, but now you have China, which is just pouring money into modernizing its own nuclear forces. Experts have a name for this. They call it the three-body problem. And a three-way standoff is way, way more unstable and unpredictable than a two-way one.
And this really gets to the core of the problem. It's a classic security dilemma. Let's say China is just upgrading its weapons to make sure they could survive a first strike. Purely defensive, right? Well, the US sees that and thinks, hey, that weakens our advantage, which then pushes the US to upgrade, and you see how the cycle starts.
And if that wasn't complicated enough, you've got this growing partnership between China and Russia. They see any daylight between the US and Europe as an opportunity, and they are constantly pushing and probing, looking for those cracks in the Western alliance.
The information war is getting pretty sophisticated too. Check out how Russian state media talks about some American leaders. It's this carefully constructed positive image. The goal seems to be to appeal to one part of the West.
And then, on the flip side, you get this. They paint European leaders like Macron as reckless warmongers. See the strategy?
It's a clear-as-day attempt to drive a wedge right down the middle of the Transatlantic alliance. Divide and conquer.
So, after all that, where does this leave us? Well, we're staring down a future where the stability we've taken for granted for decades is just coming apart at the seams, and it could be leading us right into a new, totally uncontrolled arms race.
Think about it. The treaties, the arms control agreements that basically kept the Cold War cold. They're either dead or on life support. This creates what experts call a commitment problem. When there's no trust and there are no rules, how can you believe that anyone will actually stick to their word?
And if you want a perfect example of why that trust is completely gone, just look at this quote from Dmitry Medvedev. When this is the kind of stuff being said out loud, it makes any talk of a real, lasting peace feel like a pretty dangerous fantasy to a lot of people. Which brings us to the final, really unsettling question. The old rulebook has been torn up. There are more players at the table, and they're all playing by their own rules. In this brand new, terrifyingly uncertain world, how on earth do we keep the peace? That is the challenge of our time.